Welcome to the Working Mama podcast, a show that provides real-world tips, tricks, and advice to all working mamas on how they can have a career, family, and hopefully one day break the glass ceiling. Hey there, Mama. Welcome back to another episode of the Working Mama podcast. I hope you are having an absolutely amazing day today. Over the weekend, I went away with a group of girlfriends who are pretty much, I would say, my oldest friends in the world. I've known them since year 7 and I've been working for over 20 years now. So you could probably do the maths there. A very long time, over probably 3/4 of my life. And it was really interesting. Come from different backgrounds. Also, we've got very different careers and jobs now. No one's in the same industry. But one thing as well we were all reflecting on was about the cost of living, also what we want for our kids. But also, each of us brought to the table that, we've all got our own struggles and we've all got our own challenges, which also I've been thinking about doing this episode for a little while. And I really wanted to actually just share with you that, and also just to remind you that, Mama, you're actually not alone. This week on the Instagram, I shared this quote, and I have to say I had quite a lot of feedback about it in a positive way. And the quote goes like this: a good mum has bad days, has great days, normal days, overwhelming days, picture days, trying days, super mum days, a whole lot of love days, real days, and crazy motherhood days. I'm sure you can relate. And it also makes you realize as well that as mums, we're not alone. As much as we try to, in Western culture, think that we need to do it all on our own, there's this, I don't know what it is, this pride of place of saying, yep, we're doing it. Meanwhile, in other cultures, it's very accepted to accept help from others. And they, for example, in Chinese culture, for the first month, women aren't allowed to get out of the bed. They've got so much help and support. Meanwhile, in Western culture, the first month you sometimes led to believe you need to be off running a marathon and doing things like that. So it is okay to ask for help, but also to do things on your own terms. One of the biggest things I've learned from doing this podcast, and even in the work that I do with Working Mama, it just reminds me all the time that we all have our own journey. We don't need to look left, right, up, down, and even compare ourselves to what others are doing. We're all in different situations. This year, I haven't really spoken about it much, only within friends, but I've had a real roller coaster of a year with my son starting prep, and definitely there's been highs and lows and that. But this week, he's reading books that, I think his fluency, and it's amazing. And my husband and I are both really, really proud of where he's at. But, 6 months ago, it was teachers were, need this help, that help, and intervention and blah, blah, blah. But it's one of those things as well. Everyone gets there in their own journey. He's now doing so much better. He may not have been able to read when he first started prep, but now 6 months in, he's actually doing really well. And so it's one of those things that I did actually beat myself up, and still do a little bit probably, of should I done more and things like that. Again, that word should. But, he's also a really good reminder to me that everyone gets there in the end. Everyone has their own path. No child is different. No mum is different. No approach to being a working mum is actually the same. And I think there's so much that we often go, oh, they're doing it this way, they're doing it that way. They have a cleaner, they don't have a cleaner, and things like that. There are tools and tips that can, be in our toolbox to help us along the way. But ultimately, what is most important is that you do what is best for you and your family. Also, to remember as well that you aren't alone in this journey. As much as sometimes what we think that we are, we generally aren't. And it's one of those things that when we come up for air, there's very few rare times that we sometimes do, we can look around and go, oh, that's right, they're also going through a struggle. And it was one of those things that, when I was away on the weekend and I'd been talking even about my son and some of his challenges at school, others were saying, yep, we've been through it, or they're, well and truly going to get over it. And I've experienced the same thing with other groups of friends. So it's one of those things that you think that you're alone. You think it's at the time the hardest thing, but generally as well, as soon as you start opening up to it and even asking for help or even just sharing your experiences about what you're going through. It's amazing. Even today in my corporate job, I had someone come up to me and say, I'm so surprised, or really thank you very much for sharing one time about imposter syndrome. And I said, look, I'm not afraid to be vulnerable in that way because I want to be able to help someone else, particularly someone younger that may think about it but won't necessarily verbalize it. And she said, but you appear so confident and the like. And I said, not always. I said, yes, I may have that facade and appear that way, but deep down, I've actually really had to do a lot of work, particularly over the last 18 months on my mindset to then try and really be confident internally as well as externally. And she was a little bit surprised, but it was also, I think also to her going, oh, right, if you've got that, then it's okay. And I think it's one of those things, as soon as we start opening up to that vulnerability, it's amazing what can happen. So it's, as a mum, I just wanted to jump on this week and really remind you that you're doing amazing. No matter if you're feeling like you're having the worst week ever, by taking even a micro moment for yourself, if it's just say 5 minutes after the kids have gone to bed, enjoying a cup of tea, just having some quiet time, even 5 deep breaths really help recenter where your nervous system can be. Quick tip, just do that, breathe in, breathe out. Do that a few times, and it's amazing how much that can actually really help you. So just take those micro moments. And even I've heard a quote, a scenario as well from someone that's a pilot, and in an emergency situation, he said that the worst thing you can actually do is do nothing. So even as mum, sometimes as well, we feel like, you might feel paralyzed. What am I going to do? Even if it's the smallest little step forward, you are at least taking a step forward. If you're standing still, you're probably going backwards. And in those emergency situations like the pilot, by taking action, for him, it was actually a reference to the Hudson River pilot who actually did something. He didn't freeze, he just kept going. So it's one of those things, know yourself listening to this, even if it feels hard at the time, just making those little moments and do those things, even if it's a work situation, do those things that make you feel comfortable, that help you take steps forward. But always come back to that you're amazing, that you were really good, and also work on your mindset about where are those stories coming from. I often catch myself of, where have I heard that? Why am I doing it this way? Why are you thinking those negative thoughts when there's actually really no evidence to help you there? So that's why, that's also where the power of community to help you validate maybe how you're feeling, or actually pull you out of how you're feeling. Don't be afraid to, lean on someone that can, listen. If not, seek professional, or if your organization's got an EAP, lean on that there. Another one as well, another tip is about self-care isn't selfish. Again, comes back into our mindset. As we're actually talking on the weekend as well, I said, I don't want to pay for a Pilates class. And then friends go, but how much are you paying for your kids swimming and your kids' other sport? And I was like, oh my goodness, you're right. I'm actually spending more money on my kids than I am on myself, because I see, helping them learn to swim and making sure they're, active and doing things that they enjoy is really important. But really, in fact, as well, as someone reminded me, you're actually putting your kids well above yourself, but you also deserve to also do some of those activities as well. So it's not selfish, but you're actually doing something for you to also help you be a better mum. And self-care isn't selfish. Self-care is actually looking after you. It is giving yourself permission to apply the oxygen before someone else, because we all know that working, as mums, we're the heartbeat of the family. And when you're happy, the rest of the family is also going to be happy. And you can also navigate the demands of work and motherhood. So try and schedule some me time, even if it's just, 5 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day. Do something that is going to fill your cup, rejuvenate you. It could be reading, could be exercise, could even be just scrolling on your phone. Give yourself permission to do it. At the moment, I'm loving watching the Olympics, and it's awesome. But remember, self-care isn't selfish. And also, another component that I just want to remind you of and give you permission as well. Sometimes we need each other to tell ourselves this. It's also about embracing flexibility and also setting boundaries. Embrace flexibility between work and with your schedule and adapt. You know what? Some days might not go as planned. Probably more often than not, they don't go as planned. And you know what? That's okay. I'm sure the kids are going to get fed, even if it was, say, scrambled eggs for dinner. That's perfectly okay. But you know what? That's okay. We don't set yourselves up to someone else's standards. Be your own standards and also do what's best for you and your family. It's perfectly okay. Like at the moment, I don't actually count Olympics as screen time. So I'm sure, I'd get told off. But you know what? There's also an education component as well. I'm setting standards for my own family and trying to influence my kids as well in relation to sport. But also about setting boundaries. It's also when one of the biggest things that we hear of mums at the moment is about the burnout. And burnout, on statistically is actually worse at the moment than during COVID, which is actually really scary. There is a pandemic of burnout. And a lot of this as well is because we're pushing ourselves so much. And also we need to find out time for ourselves between work and also family time. So when you're working, you focus on work, and when you're family, try and, be present as what it is. We all naturally do sometimes have that internal dialogue. But again, don't be afraid to ask for help or some delegates tasks, both at work and also at home. I have to say, I really admire colleagues that can delegate and that just naturally delegate really, really well and don't take the ownership. Unfortunately, I'm one that does take a lot of ownership. But also at home about delegating tasks as well. Don't think you need to do everything. Often it's just that conversation. So I'd just like to this episode was wanting to say that, at times it's okay to not be okay, but also to remind you that you're doing an amazing job. Being a working mum, yes, it is terribly hard at times and really stretches us, but we don't get told enough that you're amazing, that you're doing an amazing job, that you're raising amazing kids. Yes, the house might not be clean, but who cares? If your kids are happy, you're happy most of the time, you know what? Go for it. But if you're not happy, do something each day that's going to put a smile on your face. And when you get some time, reflect on what is it that you want to do. I've got a guest coming on, Megan, from Women Rising in a few weeks' time. And there was something that she's really passionate about, is actually asking what's people's visions for their lives. And so I really ask you here as well, like, where do you want to be in 12 months' time? What is it that you want to be doing, and how can you take steps towards it? I know that's a whole other podcast episode. But I just really wanted to just give you the validation and the acknowledgement to let you sit in this moment to say, yes, you're doing amazing. I'm sure you could probably write down the 10 things that you're not doing great at. So I really want to challenge you to sit down as well and write out the 5 to 10 things that you're doing amazing, that you feel like you're doing really well at, both at home and also in the workplace, and remind yourself of that list. Because sometimes in our crappy days and things aren't going great, come back to that to remind yourself that you're doing great. And this reminder and this validation of the juggle and things like that, because yes, it can be challenging, but it's a bit like a muscle. We need to, constantly build it up and to constantly remind ourselves, because there's so much around our mindset that can have a direct influence on how we are navigating the juggle. So just to recap, I just want to say, as I said, you're doing amazing. But just quickly as well, find your community, find the people that are going to support you. Could be a husband, friend, work colleague. Then secondly, make sure you're finding time for self-care, even if it's like 2 minutes or 5 minutes, just doing some deep breathing, go to bed, or even just scrolling, that's okay. Just do things that make you happy and put a smile on your face. Embrace flexibility, but also set the boundaries. So if you enjoyed this episode, I would really love if you could leave a rating or a review. Feel free as well. I've got the Working Mama Community free Facebook group that I am starting to get back up. And as always, if you've got a fellow working mum that you think would find this podcast of interest, I would love you to forward it on. So until next time, have an amazing day and speak soon. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Working Mama podcast. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast catcher. Please also feel free to contact me on any of the Working Mama social channels. Remember, Mama is MUMMA, or website www.workingmama.com.au. I would appreciate you to share this podcast with friends and colleagues, especially those that are parents managing the juggle. And I would really appreciate if you had to take the time out to leave a review of the podcast. Thank you, and see you next time. Have a great week.